Hi everyone, it's me. Welcome to today's video. Grab your pens, grab your notebooks, because I am coming at you today with some more book recs. So in today's video, we're going to be doing that fun little format of if you liked this popular book, then you should also read this book. I've got two book stacks behind me, so let's just get straight into it. All right, for our first rec, we're going to be talking about a real popular book. So if you liked Yellowface by R.F. Kuang, I think you should read Best Offer Wins by Marisa Kashino. So this is actually a thriller, but I think it's very similar to Yellowface in so many ways, in the sense that it's not really a typical thriller where you have some sort of a crime or missing persons or like murder case or whatever that happened, and you're not like trying to clue pieces of what happened. You're really just living in the mind of a really, really wild, twisted, obsessive individual, and you're seeing as they navigate their issues and their stress that it probably, like so many other people in this world, are feeling, but you follow just this really, really unlikable character as they get more and more and more unhinged throughout the story. So very, very similar to Yellowface in that sense, but where in Yellowface we followed a really unlikable character as they made morally wrong decisions to further herself in her writing career. In Best Offer Wins, we follow a similar kind of obsessive, unlikable character, but instead of publishing industry, we get real estate. So our main protagonist, Margot, in this is trying to find a house for her and her husband to move into and start a family, but the housing market is insane. Like, it's so hard to get into, which is honestly so realistic, but instead of dealing with it the way, you know, the rest of us do, Margot becomes completely unhinged. She starts hearing about this house that is about to hit the market. It's not on the market yet, but from what she's seen and heard, it seems like the perfect dream house. And so instead of just waiting for this house to hit the market, she starts kind of like spying on the current owners of the house, starting to infiltrate herself into their lives in the off chance that they might like fall in love with her kind of as friends, and to sell to her directly in a private sale and like just avoid the market and bidding wars and all that stuff altogether. But the more she gets obsessed with this house and the more she gets kind of like integrated with these current owners, she makes more and more and more unhinged decisions as we go. Like, it starts with kind of light stalking and then, you know, it spirals. So I think if you liked Yellowface, you would like this one. It's kind of like if we actually acted on all of our intrusive thoughts, this would happen. So these two books I just found very similar as I was reading, and I honestly really loved both of them. Really, really entertaining, really, really, really wild, but that's our first rec. Okay, this next rec is going to be if you really love reading about kind of grumpy old people that are set in their ways, but in kind of the most endearing way. If you liked A Man Called Ove by Fredrik Backman, you must read The Correspondent by Virginia Evans. I actually just recently finished this book and I sobbed. Absolutely sobbed at the end. In fact, I sobbed at the end of both of these books, so there's already one thing that these books have in common. But as I mentioned, if you like following just kind of like grumpy old characters that are really, really stubborn and set in their ways, but you kind of see how they start opening up to things, like the more they interact with other people, whether it's other people younger than them or just expanding their circles, meeting new people, being more open to things. Both of these books have that element, and then yeah, both of these books kind of just tear you apart at the end, but it's like you're so emotional at the end of these stories, but it's kind of heartwarming at the same time. It's like a happy, sad, bittersweet cry with both of these ones. So in terms of The Correspondent, we follow Sybil. She's in her 70s, and we just kind of live with her for a couple years, so this one is quite long spanning in terms of time, but her whole story is told through her correspondence. So with letters that she writes to other people, with letters that she receives in return, and also emails, because we are living in a digital age. And throughout this entire book, a kind of like theme or motto that kept popping up was, if you send a letter to someone, likely chances are they will send one back. Even in these modern day times where letter writing isn't really in, you know, it's not really trendy. A lot of us just text and comment, and even like, who emails anymore other than for work purposes? Like, who uses email for personal reasons? I don't know, but just seeing this book, seeing how Sybil really continues to see the value in letter writing, how letters can feel even more intentional than something like an email, is really just wonderful in this story. I also really loved how this kind of almost simplified human connection and stripped it back down to those days where, like, you know, when you're a kid and you meet another kid at the park or something and you've never seen them before in your life, but you just kind of walk over, you say hi, you play a game together or whatever, and all of a sudden you become best friends. I really felt that in this book, but instead of like meeting someone at a park, you send a letter. You know, you take that leap. There might be a stranger out there that you just reach out to, and that stranger might end up being like a soulmate, you know, a soul friend, a pen pal that you just become so close with through this correspondence. I just really, really loved that about this book and how it highlighted letter writing in that way. And yeah, we do see Sybil as she continues to interact, correspond with all of these people. She really grows as a character as well, even in like her 70s, and I love that. So I think these two books definitely have a similar vibe, a similar kind of trajectory of the story, but they are written in very different ways, where A Man Called Ove is written obviously in a more regular narrative format, but also holds a quirky sense of humor. The Correspondent definitely isn't like as quirky and funny, but there definitely is a little bit of subtle humor in it, and just the letter writing is so wonderful. So if you liked this, read this. Shall we dive into a little bit of a romantasy next? Okay, I've mentioned this comparison before, but if you liked Heartless Hunter by Kristen Ciccarelli, you must read The Dagger and the Flame by Catherine Doyle. So these two are very similar kind of YA fantasies with like a little tiny bit of spice, like YA spice, where we have very much a cat and mouse dynamic between our two main characters. So these two books are very similar feeling in that way in terms of just like the romance dynamic, but where in Heartless Hunter we have a witch and a witch hunter, in The Dagger and the Flame we have two characters that are pretty much in kind of opposite rival gangs. We have our protagonist who is a member of the Order of the Thieves essentially, and then we have our love interest who is in the Order of the Daggers, or like the Assassins, and our love interest has been tasked with basically hunting down our main protagonist. So yeah, we definitely have a similar sort of like cat and mouse chase in both of these. I feel like both of these are also quite simple in terms of the fantasy world, so they're really, really easy to dive into, really quick to read, really just bingeable, addictive. But honestly, where I really, really loved Heartless Hunter, I felt kind of disappointed in the second book in this duology, The Rebel Witch, because I wanted us to expand a little bit more on our characters, on the magic, and also the world in the second book, and we didn't really get that. The second book kind of felt like just more of the same that we got in Heartless Hunter, which I know a lot of people really loved, but it wasn't just for me. With The Dagger and the Flame, on the other hand, in the second book, The Rebel and the Rose, we actually did like venture out, explore more of the world, develop a little bit more of our magic, but still kept that main romance plot line as a really strong element in the book too. Like definitely stayed very prominent in terms of importance. This series is going to be a trilogy. There are currently 2 books out, so there's one more to come, but I really, really love this, especially the second book. So yeah, if you're looking for something that will give you a similar sort of thrill that Heartless Hunter did, I would highly recommend The Dagger and the Flame. Let's get cozy with this next rec. So a very popular cozy fantasy is obviously Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Faeries by Heather Fawcett. If you enjoyed this one and you're looking for something else, I give you Sorcery and Small Magics by Maiga, Doocy. I absolutely love this book. I actually love this more than the Emily Wilde books, but these two are both very similar in terms of the fact that they're both cozy fantasies. We also have a big influence of academia, and in both of these, our characters are in school, they're studying, they're researching. Both of these books are also very woodsy. In both, we get kind of like a venture, a journey into the forest. So they're both kind of planty in that way. But in Sorcery and Small Magics, we also have a little bit of a queer romance, which I absolutely love. So in this one, we have academic rivals. We have Leah Vander Lovage and we have Sebastian Grimm. And they're both in school, they're in the same class, they're studying together to learn magic. But in this world, magic requires 2 people to actually like complete a spell, because magic works in 2 steps. So we have the writing of the magic, like the writing of the spell, and then we have the actual execution of the spell. And if you are a writer of a spell, you can't also be a person who can actually like cast the spell. So in this school, we always have like a writer of the spells and a caster of the spells that are paired together to like actually do assignments and stuff. And so Leah Vander and Sebastian obviously get put together because Leah Vander is a writer and Sebastian is a caster. As they're going through class, a spell backfires and Leah Vander actually finds himself cursed and kind of bound to obey everything that Sebastian Grimm tells him to do. So this obviously is not a good situation because they're kind of of like rivals, they don't like each other, and so the fact that Sebastian now has so much power over Leovander is not great. Also, the spell that they were doing that kind of backfired and caused this is a highly illegal spell. And so the two of them have to try and keep this a secret and at the same time kind of like venture out to find this elusive witch of the woods to see if this person can help them lift their spell. And of course, along the way, the two of them get to know each other a little bit more. It's just so much fun. I really, really love this book. I will give you a warning. This is the first to a series and only the first book has come out so far. It's definitely not one of those books that will leave you kind of like in pain at the ending. Like, it's not a super cliffhanger ending that you'll be just dying to read the next one, but the next one I'm pretty sure is in the works, so hopefully there will be more to come soon on this one. But yeah, love this for a cozy fantasy. So we're kind of going all over the world in terms of genres and moods for these book recs in this video. This next category we're jumping into is kind of angsty YA. So if you liked If He Had Been With Me by Laura Nowlin, I remember this one really making the rounds on TikTok a couple years ago. You need to read You've Reached Sam by Dustin Thao. I think these are both kind of similar because they're both YA, really highly emotional romances that deal with a loss of your kind of first love. And we have a little bit of angsty teenager in both of them, although I will say If He Had Been With Me is like a little more angsty and You've Reached Sam is a little bit more just emotional. But the premise of both of these is essentially you follow a like teenage character in high school who falls in love, but this first love passes away, and you see how that affects our protagonist at, you know, a teenage kind of a young age. And that's not a spoiler because you find out about the passing of both of these love interests or like loved ones right at the beginning of the book, and then for the rest of the book you just like either backtrack or just see how your character kind of deals with it. So the main difference is that in If He Had Been With Me, that's such a hard title to like say or remember for whatever reason. In this one we find about the tragedy at the beginning of the book, and then we jump back in time and start seeing kind of like how our characters met, how they started forming this relationship with each other, and we see all of the events leading up to the accident. In You've Reached Sam, we find out about the death at the very beginning, and we do have some flashbacks of, you know, like going back and seeing memories and stuff, but it's more so in the lens of our protagonist going through the stages of grief. And so a lot of it is more focused in like present day time, like what are we gonna do with it? And I'm gonna be honest, sometimes I do give book recs that aren't complete 5-star reads for me, and neither of these were complete 5-star reads for me, but I also feel like the reasons why were kind of similar for both of them. Basically around the middle parts of both of these books, I started just feeling bored, started feeling over it, but then at the very end, both of these books really brought it together, and I did sob like a baby at the end of both of these books. So I do feel like if you really love this one, you would also really love this one. But if you felt a little bit bored with this one and highly emotional at the end, you would also feel the same way about this one. So yeah, just very similar vibes with both of these. Jumping back into academia for this next one, we have another R.F. Kuang comparison. So if you liked Babel by R.F. Kuang, you must read The Scholar and the Last Fairy Door by H.G. Parry. These are both historical fantasies where we're set in real world and we're following real historical events, but make it just a little bit magical and also take us to Oxford. So where in Babel, we're set in the 1820s, I think, 1828, and we follow Robin, who goes to Oxford as, you know, kind of an outsider. Like, he's moved here from Canton. He doesn't come from a very prestigious family. In fact, he's lost all of his family. He goes to Oxford feeling as this kind of underdog, outsider type character, but while he's there, he meets this group of friends. You know, they bond together, but at the same time, they kind of start tearing each other apart, and you kind of see the process of how that's happening. We get kind of a similar emotional story arc with this one, where this one is set in 1920s. We have Clover, who goes to Camford, which is actually a hybrid between Cambridge and Oxford. So we have the Oxford comparison here. And while at first she feels very much like an outsider at this school, she starts making these friends. There's this wonderful found family that, you know, forms in that way. But then we see as, you know, things start getting chaotic, they start clashing with each other, and we kind of see them start start falling apart. In both of these, we have some good critique on kind of like academia in general and how certain groups of people just are always sort of at this disadvantage in these academic settings, whether you are a woman, whether you are a person of color, whether you come from just, you know, a less wealthy family. I think both of these have critiques on all of that sort of stuff, and I really enjoyed both of these. They very much give the feeling of like, what would our world be like if there was just a little bit of magic in it? Like in this one, we're in the era of World War I, but like, what if World War I had fairies? So these two fit together very, very well. And then for this next one, if you ever asked yourself, what if Recursion by Blake Crouch was a literary fiction instead? I honestly don't know if anyone's ever asked themselves that, but if you have, on the off chance you have, I would say pick up Lightbreakers by Asia Gabel. These are both stories where we have a similar type of technology going on. We essentially have the idea of time travel, and time travel is very much based on memories and sort of mapping out your memories, and like that's how you time travel and start these kind of folds in time. I don't want to get too much into like the nitty-gritty details of how the technology works in these books, because I feel like a big part of reading these is like, you know, actually reading it and getting that knowledge and experience for yourself through the author's words. But both forms of like time travel and sort of like memory manipulation work pretty much the same way in both of these, but where Recursion goes kind of a more thriller, exciting, sci-fi type of a way, like an Inception type of a direction, Lightbreakers definitely goes more into the literary fiction character side of it all, which is really interesting because, you know, while I did love Recursion, and I actually loved Recursion more than this one, again, I'm always honest when I give my book recs, Recursion was really fun for the plot. It was really fun for the excitement. It was really fun for the twists and just like, what the heck is happening, like all of those feelings. But we don't actually get a lot of character work in Recursion, and we do get a lot of that in Lightbreakers. So we have a very similar play with memory, time, folds in time, all of that sort of thing. But instead of the plot just going like crazy time travel, we more so dive into the emotional effects of like what happens to these characters when they get this option to like go into the past, time travel, like what will they want to do, what will their urges be, and we get more of like that stuff and how it affects their relationships and all of that. So definitely a very different feeling book, but as I was reading Lightbreakers, I could not stop thinking about Recursion because of how similar everything worked. So if Recursion was litfic, that's this book. And I did promise you that we were going all around the world in terms of genre, so we're going full thriller next. If you liked The Only One Left by Riley Sager, you should totally read My Husband's Wife by Alice Feeney. So I think both of these were just very exciting for me to read. Both of these have plot twists that are just embedded throughout the story. Instead of like a build up to one big plot twist at the end, we have plot twists at like almost every chapter. I think both of these books also have very similar creepy elements. Like in both of these, we have like an old kind of creepy house on top of a cliffside that's, you know, it's very windy and stormy and you don't know how long this house is gonna last kind of a thing. We also have a character who like doesn't talk. I find that's always kind of really scary. And so I think with those two elements and also with a whole bunch of other things, these books felt kind of similar in terms of vibes for me to read, but the stories are very different. So in My Husband's Wife, we follow our protagonist as she goes out for a run one evening. She comes back home after her run and finds that her key is not fitting into like the key hole, like into the front door of her house. So she knocks on the door and this woman who looks very, very similar to her opens it and starts insisting that she is actually our protagonist. So we get this, I'm Eden, no, I'm Eden kind of a moment. And immediately you're just like, what the heck is going on? So our protagonist Eden is just like, no, you're not Eden, I'm Eden. Her husband actually appears like behind this other Eden, and our original Eden is like, oh my goodness, husband, thank goodness you're here. Can you tell this weird crazy lady to like get out of my house and stop trying to pretend to be me? What is she doing here? And her husband actually says, who are you? I've never seen you in my life. This is my real wife. This is Eden, pointing to like fake Eden. And so our protagonist is left outside of her house with none of her belongings on her because she didn't bring ID. She didn't bring her phone on this run. It's just her and her yoga pants. And she has no way to prove to anyone that she is actually Eden. And this is kind of compounded even more because her and her husband had actually only moved to this new town, to this new house like a month ago. And Eden herself has always been a naturally just kind of introverted type of character, a homebody. So she hasn't really gone out into town and met people and made friends in this new town. So literally there's no one who knows her in this new town that could vouch for her and be like, no, this is the real Eden. The only person that could have done that is her husband. And her husband is insisting that she is not actually her. So we continue to follow the story as we get like twist after twist after twist, and it's just so exciting and such a bingeable read. So definitely a really good thriller, and yeah, has some very similar elements to The Only One Left. Okay, diving back into some magic. If you are looking for a very beautifully written, very unique and atmospheric fantasy, and if you loved The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern, please read A Stage Set for Villains by Shannon J. Spann. I absolutely loved both of these books. They both have really, really descriptive writing, and they both have a very similar environment, or like a main element, where in The Night Circus we get this mysterious circus that appears every once in a while. It just pops up overnight, and we have tons of people that just like follow the circus, kind of worship it, and the circus itself is just like kind of magical and also very, very mysterious. We get a very similar vibe in A Stage Set for Villains, but instead of circus we have theater. So in this one we have a traveling playhouse that also kind of just like pops up one day out of nowhere, and in this playhouse we have these godlike actors called players that just, they put on shows, they act, they put on like theater shows. And in this world, people either love this playhouse or they really hate this playhouse. Some people really are like terrified of the players and they just like back away at all costs. They want to shut the playhouse down. They want to like bargain with them to be like, please don't pop up in my territory. But then we have the other half of the population that really worships them, that loves them, goes to every single show, follows them around. And our protagonist Riven is on the side that hates the players. And Riven actually, when she was a child, encountered one of the players and was cursed by one of them. So she's been living with this curse her entire life. One day, the playhouse arrives in her like little village, I guess, and the playhouse actually announces that they are going to be hosting this spectacle where regular mortal people can enter into this competition for a chance to steal a player's immortality and become a player themselves. And so obviously Riven as a protagonist gets caught up in all of this. She starts seeing this competition as a good way to heal her own curse, but as she gets in, you know, she starts getting entangled with the players, especially one player in particular, and there we have it. That's her story. I would definitely say this is a mix between The Night Circus and Caraval by Stephanie Garber as well. It's just all a little bit abstract, if you know what I mean. Like, you know what's going on, but there's also so much in it that's kind of whimsy in the best way, and like not completely solid, but solid enough that you can follow the story, and it's just so much fun. As a theater lover myself, I absolutely loved this. We have a magic system that is based on acting techniques, which is so cool. And so while The Night Circus felt very much like a love letter to the circus, A Stage Set for Villains felt like a love letter to theater. And in both of these books, I just loved the commitment to the bit, like dedicated to their themes, and both such atmospheric and unique reads. So I love these two. Also, the main male character in A Stage Set for Villains was giving me Jax vibes. So if you did love Caraval for Jax, if you did love Once Upon a Broken Heart for Jax, please read this book. The banter is so good. The charm is so good in this one. So there we have it. And then speaking of Jax, actually, my last book comparison actually does involve Once Upon a Broken Heart by Stephanie Garber. So if you loved this book or this series, please read Belladonna by Adeline Grace. Please, it's so good. I loved this trilogy so much. These are both YA romanticities, and they both kind of have that fairy tale nostalgia feeling. I would say in terms of direct comparison, the third book in the series is very, very much the Once Upon a Broken Heart world. It gave the same feelings of whimsy. It gave the same feelings of, as I mentioned, fairy tale. And we also had a dynamic in the third book that really reminded me of Evangeline and Jax. I think one of the main similarities between these two is that we follow a protagonist that just wants to be a girl. You know what I mean? We read so many romanticities where our female protagonists are like assassins, they're fighters, they're cool, they're trained in combat, they want to be warriors, and I love that. I love how strong a lot of female protagonists are, but sometimes I just want to read a protagonist that wants just a nice life, you know? Like in both of these, we have a main character who just wants to find a husband, find the love of their life, go to fancy balls, wear a dress, and run through the castle. And I loved that about both of these. The main difference is that while Once Upon a Broken Heart is just straight true whimsy, Belladonna has a little bit of a gothic twist to it. So we do have the same elements, as I mentioned, of a female character who just wants love, who wants a nice life, who wants to find a husband. A lot of this series is set during like courting season in this Regency era, but then we add poisons, but then we add death, but then we add a gothic mansion, and we add a murder mystery, and we add ghosts. And I don't know about you, but that just is the perfect combination for me. I loved the series. I ate them all up. I devoured them. I loved the trilogy as a whole, but yeah, the third book was absolute perfection for me. I loved the way this ended, and so I would definitely say give this series a shot if you loved these books. All right, you guys, book stacks behind me have been cleared, so I have talked about all of the book recs that I wanted to for today's video, so I hope you enjoyed this one. I hope you got some new recs to add to your TBR, but I'm gonna leave you guys here for now. So if you did enjoy this video, please leave me a like and a comment. If you don't know what to comment down below, maybe just add another, like if you liked this book, read this book. Give another book rec in the comments so we can just continue to fill the comment section with more recs. If you like me, subscribe, do that bell thing, and I will see you in the next one.